The Centurion Project. Written by the 8th Day of Night. The Crystal Empire Interlude. Section 1, Part 2. Elias stared at the crystal-clear blue sky while a pair of the Legion's healers mended his frostbitten feet. Due to the pursuing Shadow Pony, he hadn't noticed when he had lost feeling in his limbs, and since his socks had soaked through, their capacity to keep his toes warm had failed. As a result, the remaining 4 toes on each foot had blackened during the snowy trek. But one of the mage auxiliaries attributed to magical qualities she had noticed in the blizzard outside of the Empire. He had only noticed when he tried to walk normally and tumbled to the ground. The warm air and sunny skies within the Empire warmed everything, and when he had pulled away one of his stockings, he had been greeted with nasty blackness of frozen flesh. Luck was on his side, however. First, none of the ponies had gotten frostbite, though Strong Breeze was looking at a nasty case of hypothermia. Second was the fact that ponies could fully heal frostbitten extremities. He was looking at a full recovery, something that would be accomplished within minutes. Some of his legionaries weren't so lucky. Sitting to his left as the healers worked, Bookbinder told him the toll Sombra had extracted. Counting Strong Breeze, 9 ponies had suffered grievous enough wounds to put them out of action, though due to the quick reactions of his healers, none of them were going to die. The wounded lay to his right. A few were already sleeping, put under heavy sedative spells with their wounds and were bound tight, while others bit back moans as the healers implemented triage, saving the strongest spells and immediate treatment for their more heavily wounded fellows. Elias fixated on a large shard of black crystal that poked through an earth pony's abdomen. The mare stared with pain-filled eyes at the grass, not making a sound as 3 healers worked to safely extract the crystal. They were having some trouble, since the black crystal seemed to resist their attempts to magically remove it. One of the healers called over Pegasus' healer, who eyed the crystal appraisingly, then began putting on a pair of rubber gloves. As she set about carefully extracting the shard, Elias looked at the other pony stricken with the magical blocking crystals. Shining Armor sat next to his sister and her friends, rubbing at his horn, which had small crystals sprouting from it. The stallion had come flying through the barrier shortly after the Legion's healers dragged Elias and his load of wounded ponies through. And while the human had begun to berate the ponies for dragging him away from the fight, the healers had shot back, pointing out that he was carrying 2 wounded ponies and was injured himself. He had foregone any right to fight a holding action while carrying away the wounded. Luckily, after Shining Armor's cannonball appearance, the tally had come back that everyone was safe in the Empire, and, despite their injuries, everyone would live. It was these facts that had helped Elias relax somewhat, enough to let the healers work on his feet when he collapsed at least. Elias strained to hear what Shining Armor was saying to his sister and her friends, but after a few moments, he recognized that the effort was futile. Elias shifted his gaze to Bookbinder, who was watching him carefully, her muzzle curled down in a frown. Elias snorted and looked back at the sky. I'd wipe that concern off your face, Auditor. A little frostbite never killed anyone. The unicorn's muzzle didn't change.
Maybe if it was natural frostbite, but your feet were black, General. My concern is that of a subordinate who is worried if her general will be able to walk.
Elias closed his eyes and mentally chastised himself. Of course she would think like that. She had been one of the best ponies at keeping her agreement, yet here he was testing her once again. It needed to stop. Apologies, Auditor, he thought aloud. That is a valid concern, but in truth, I could fight on my hands and knees if I needed to. He smiled. Whether I'd be allowed to is another question. One of the unicorns at his feet, a pink mare named Kindheart, snorted.
If I had any say-so, and I do, you wouldn't walk today even after finishing restoring your feet. If we had been out there for a minute or more, or if you hadn't had those socks on, you wouldn't have feet right now. There would have been nothing we could have done to fix this.
The healer smiled at Bookbinder.
And I believe we have you to thank for that, Auditor.
The unicorn blushed and looked away.
It was nothing, healer. Just a little something I wanted to give General Bright ages ago. We just never found the time. What with preparing for the march and all. Well, the timing couldn't have been any better today,
Geinard said with a smile.
And I'm sure General Bright is very thankful, even if he only expresses that thanks with glares and growls.
Elias sat up on his elbows and glared at the unicorn, who grinned back. I said that your orders superseded mine when it came to giving medical care, Elias growled. I did not say you could be flippant. The healer shrugged.
Then fire me, General. I'm sure the Solar Guard will welcome another healer.
Elias scowled at the mayor, but he laid back down, conceding the point. That had been another development in the days and weeks following his personal separation with Luna. His legionaries had started receiving enticing offers to join the other guard forces. Pay raises, additional benefits, awards. The offers were as numerous as they were lucrative. To his surprise, the offers were universally rejected, with some of his legionaries even getting in fights over them. He had received more than one report of legionaries brawling with solar guards during their limited free time, and while the legionaries always came out on top, he had been forced to revoke their leave until he found a solution. After bribing a bar owner for Legion exclusivity, he had loosened their reins slightly, giving the Legion clear terms that if they were found brawling with other guards, no matter who started it, they would be punished. Fights continued occurring anyway, with the offers continuing in intensity, joined by attempted smear campaigns in the castle rumor mill. The legionaries responded in kind, taking whatever punishments he dished out with smiles. Elias heard more than one pony bragging about the amount of times they had been tied to the pole for a lashing, taking each strike as a mark of pride, a badge earned in defense of the Legion's name. It was hearing the pony's words that made him realize that his plan was working. He didn't know when it had truly taken effect, but his ponies were loyal to him to the core, and any attempt to draw them away from the Legion was met with harsher and harsher reprisals. It probably helped Elias cause he offered them everything he could on the conclusion of their contracts. Scarlet Shield had dubbed the rewards the Elysian Reforms, and while Elias hoped that they would be adopted into the wired equestrian military, he was more than pleased with the knowledge that his legionaries would be taken care of. Each of the ponies under his command received the best lifelong medical care for themselves and their immediate families, a permanent pay grant that depended on how many times they extended their contracts, as well as a cascade of accolades and awards for honorable service. He and Bookbinder, Nightflash, and especially Scarlet Shield had spent days poring over equestrian and Roman military codes, comparing what worked and what didn't with both, all in the effort to make the ideal reward for the soldiers. Even without his reforms, however, Elias saw the sense of the Legion coming together. The ponies wore their red with pride, and gone were the days when he had to order ponies to guard the Legion standards. If taking a whipping for defending the Legion's armor was an honor, then guarding the standards had become synonymous with guarding the princesses to the legionaries. Calls for volunteers were unnecessary, with the legionaries establishing their own schedule on who got to guard the standards when. Inspections were slowly becoming unnecessary as well, as Elias caught his Centurion spending more time with their cohorts, making sure each piece of equipment was at its absolute best. Despite all the setbacks and jostling from the other guard forces, his ponies were becoming professional soldiers, and the better they got, the closer Elias felt to them. They took pride in what they were doing, and even the weakest was at least very capable. It made Elias not want to lose a single one, and so far that had been the case, but the legionaries knew they had a slight bit of power over his head now, and while they wouldn't dare to abuse it or genuinely threaten him with it, they did engage in the mildest bits of teasing when they were able, with the healers being the worst offenders. As he stared up at the sky, Elias knew that he wouldn't have had it any other way. Flippant healers kept him humble, and loyal troops that were ready to take a whip to defend his legion? He couldn't help but to smile at the thought of such devotion.
All finished, General,
the healer said, breaking Elias from his daydream of a shining legion, completely whole and victorious after a long march. The human sat up and wiggled his toes, sharing the feeling of each one of them. Thank you, healer, he said. The unicorn pulled back with a look of mock surprise and looked to Bookbinder.
Auditor, I think I need to submit a medical injury form because my ears seem to be damaged. Was I just thanked by General Bright?
Bookbinder giggled.
Your ears are fine, Healer Kindheart, though I recommend toning back the wit just a tad. Thanks can be rescinded. And no pony is non-expendable,
Kindheart finished. She bowed her head to Elias.
Thank you for your kind words, General.
Elias felt a twinge of embarrassment at the unicorn's bowing.
What did I tell you lot about bowing?
He asked.
I'm not royalty, so don't bow.
He nodded toward Shining Armor.
If you really want to get it out of your system, go bow to him. He's the one who saved our asses anyway.
Uh-huh,
Kindheart replied.
I'm sure General didn't dish out any orders. Certainly none that helped keep ponies from skatering across the frozen north. He certainly didn't form an orderly retreat that allowed us to withdraw the majority of the Legion into the safety of the Empire.
Bookbinder joined in.
And that goes without saying he didn't carry 2 wounded ponies back on his own volition, all without his body armor. Also, he...
All right, enough.
Elias cut in.
I get it. I helped.
He squinted at the sun.
Now, instead of trying to get a rise out of me, why don't one of you do something useful and go fetch Prince Armor and First Centurion Night Flash? There is clearly a problem that needs to be solved here. And while Princess Luna said that Twilight Sparkle is taking point, it doesn't mean we can't start forming a plan of attack.
Bookbinder got on her hooves and offered a short salute.
Of course, General. Right away.
The unicorn trotted away, leaving Elias to pull his sandals back on. The leather was a bit cold on his freshly healed toes, but the socks Bookbinder had given him were becoming soggy as they thawed out, so there was no hope of putting them back on. With the sun beating down, Elias quickly found himself pulling the scarf from his neck and the gloves from his arms. It was strange how warm it was given the snowy waste outside the barrier, but Elias chalked it up to magic and moved on, focusing on the mission at hand. Sombra was clearly an opponent that Elias would have a difficult time fighting. The Shadow Pony hadn't been able to follow them into the Empire, meaning that Elias would have to take troops outside the safety barrier to fight him. That meant dealing with the cold again, and while ponies could withstand the lower temperatures for a time, they would eventually succumb if the engagement ended up being prolonged, which Elias imagined it would be. The auxiliaries he had kept with him had lodged at least a dozen spells at Sombra, but besides some bellows of anger, the Shadow Pony had seemed unaffected. Elias didn't try to fight the unicorn with conventional weapons, but he highly doubted they would be any more effective than magic was. That left the big question on how to fight Sombra. General? Elias blinked and looked down from the brilliant blue sky to find his requested ponies waiting quietly. Shining Armor was giving him a cautious look, while his legionaries waited patiently for orders. Elias cleared his throat and pulled his legs in, getting to his feet to rest in a crouch.
Right. Prince Armor, I'm assuming your sister told you that she's running point on this little errand.
Shining Armor shrugged. She only told me that Princess Celestia sent her to check up on Cadence and I. He looked back to where the purple mare and her friends were walking and talking amongst themselves. She said that Princess Celestia told her about King Sombra, but that she didn't actually expect to find him. His blue eyes met Elias. But you seemed very prepared, and the fact that you're even here tells me that princesses knew more than what Twilight was told. What's going on here? Is this some sort of test? Elias snorted.
Unfortunately, I can't speak for Twilight and the other elements, but Princess Celestia decided that she no longer trusts me with my command. This is her way of determining if I'm strong enough to lead my legion through the sad Arabian March.
Shining Armor frowned and stared at the ground for a moment. Why would you, of all ponies, need tested? He muttered under his breath. After another moment of staring, he started and rolled his shoulders before him again, meeting Elias's gaze. Ultimately, I don't care why you're here. I'm just glad you are. We are in desperate need of ponies to help get the Empire moving again.
What do you mean?
Bookbinder asked. I'll explain while we walk to the castle, Shining Armor said. Are your guards ready to move? Elias snorted and pushed himself to his feet. He stripped off his hoodie and tucked it into his sword belt.
They're soldiers, not guards, and yes, we are more than able to move. A few minor injuries won't stop us.
He put his finger in his mouth and blew a shrill whistle, drawing everyone's attention.
Listen up!
Elias bellowed.
I want volunteers to bear stretchers for the wounded. Everyone else form up in the marching block. We will be making a good first impression.
Night Flash, Ice Blossom, and Grey Granite immediately began belling out orders, directing their legionaries into their appropriate positions, while Bookbinder and Snowball moved to go help the healers. Almost as an afterthought, Ice Blossom trotted back over to Elias and shrugged off his armor, then trotted away. As the human crouched down and began refitting himself, he squinted up the shining armor.
So, what's the situation here?
He tilted his head.
Aside from the demon that seems to be keeping you boxed in.
Shining armor looked towards his sister, and with a nod of his head, the purple unicorn and her friends came trotting over. Though they gathered around, Elias noticed that they stayed well clear of him, staying at arm's length as they did their best not to stare at him. He elected to ignore the overly nervous ponies and instead focused his eyes on hands on putting his armor on, while his ears were focused on Shining Armor's words.
You've all met King Sombra, and while he's a big problem, he's unfortunately not our biggest, Shining Armor said. Really, we have 3 problems. The first being Sombra, but the second is the crystal ponies themselves. You'll see what I'm talking about when we get to the city proper, but they're all out of it. Out of it?
Twilight asked. Shining Armor nodded towards the city.
You'll see. General Bright, are we ready?
Elias rose from his crouch and finished strapping on his cuirass, then looked towards his legionaries. Save for the healers taking their time getting into position, the Legion was standing at attention, their armor gleaming in the brilliant sunlight. Elias looked back towards Shining Armor.
We are. Let's get moving.
He led the way to the front of the formation, casting an expecting eye on his ponies as he passed. He saw a few chests puff out with pride, and he again found himself having to suppress a smile. Upon arriving to the front of the formation, Elias let Shining Armor lead the way, with the Legion falling in behind them with ease. As they began making their way towards the center of the Empire, Shining Armor talked.
I'm really glad you're here, Twily,
he said with a smile towards his sister. That smile dropped as he looked back towards Elias.
And you as well, General. With Cadence and I came up here, it was my responsibility to gauge the power of the Empire's military and establish a new guard force to keep the borders safe. But
they hit the first of the Empire's houses, and as they walked past, a few doors opened, revealing dazed-looking ponies. While they weren't colorless, Elias thought the crystal ponies looked duller in comparison with the equestrians. Their eyes in particular seemed off, almost gray in color, and what life we saw behind their dull gazes looked hazy and confused. The gazes of the crystal ponies seemed to pass over the obvious alien in their midst, and instead focus on the rows of silver-clad ponies. A look of fear seemed to fill their eyes, and they hid behind the doors, their voices muddled in scared whispers. Elias watched a purple mare shepherd a pair of fillies inside, slamming the door behind them, and a glance back found some of the chest puffing diminishing. Shining Armor noticed too.
And they were like that when Cadence and I arrived too, he said. A little less, but the fear was still there. It was only after we got to the castle and Cadence announced our intentions to help them that they seemed to relax. We'll make an announcement for you and your Legion. Don't worry. They're just still a bit skittish after what King Sombra did to them.
And what exactly did he do to them?
Elias asked.
Princess Luna was rather vague on the what of his reign.
He enslaved them,
Shining Armor answered grimly.
Used mind control to make them fight Equestrian's army when Princess Celestia and Princess Luna tried to intervene. Not much more is known than that, though. The library in Canterlot had next to nothing, and we haven't had time to go through the library here. That was Sombra trying to beat down the door.
Kylie began to bounce as her voice took a cheerful note.
Oh, research! I can't wait to see the library. The first week we'll spend just cataloging, then the second we can organize everything. Then we can...
She froze when she found Elias glaring at her. The purple unicorn shrank and looked to the ground, remaining silent. The human looked back to Shining Armor.
How much longer will the barrier hold?
The unicorn sighed and looked towards the castle.
A few days, if that. I was giving Cadence as much of my magic as I could spare, but with my horn all blocked up, I don't think she can last much longer.
Could someone else donate their magic to give us time to find a solution?
Elias asked. Shining Armor shook his head.
Maybe Twilight, but unicorn magic is more complex than just passing energy back and forth. Typically, those who cherish true love can share their magic.
He looked towards his sister.
I don't doubt that Twilight and Cadence share familiar love, but it might not be enough. And even if it is,
It won't be as strong as a transfer. At best, it will buy us a week, while also incapacitating the only pony I believe that can figure this out." While Tali blushed and gave a humble reply, Elias frowned in thought. He looked around as his mind raced, taking in the architecture of the Crystal Empire. Like its namesake, everything was made from crystal, from the roads to the houses. It put an odd glint on everything that Elias found irritating. Of course, some of the elements had differing opinions.
Oh my, look how beautiful it all is.
Verity gushed.
It's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous.
Elias kept an even expression on his face and did his best not to glare at the elements as he began chattering about the natural beauty of the Empire. Instead, he turned his eyes and started making a mental map of the roads surrounding the central palace. A basic plan for establishing lookout posts and guard stations started filling his mind, and he glanced back to calls for Scarlet. The Vegeta seemed to read his mind as soon as they made eye contact, and he flapped into the air, then spiraled to a landing next to Elias. In his hooves was a crudely drawn map of the Empire, as they had seen so far. Elias did a once-over on the map, then grunted.
Start putting guard positions on the main route. We'll put barricades at every other block.
Do you think that'll help? Shining Armor asked. You saw Sombra. I'm not sure barricades will do anything to even slow him down.
Elias snorted. Probably not, but they do keep my legionaries active and focused, as well as tell the crystal ponies that we're here to defend them. Perhaps once they realize we're friends, not foe, they'll start coming towards with useful information.
Actually, General,
Tali demanded.
I was thinking that maybe after talking with Cadence, my friends and I could go out and talk to some of the crystal ponies and conduct some research, while you work with getting your guard set up.
Ignoring the unintended insult, Elias nodded slowly.
Fine. Once we're at the palace, Auditor will go with you to the library to look for a complete map of the Empire.
There's a war room we can coordinate from, Shining Armor added. I'll show you once we get inside. Can your ponies keep up?
Elias snorted. Please. They could outrun everyone here and keep the pace for hours. Legionaries! Double time!
The order was met with an immediate response, and the ponies' walk became a brisk trot as they sped toward the palace. A lot of calm before the storm, and I am super excited to get into more of this because I absolutely love this arc. This section and section 2, I guess part 2, technically. I have to change the name so it's just not part 1, part 1, part 1, part 2. Yeah. It's always fun trying to do things for YouTube. That aside though, I would like to thank my wonderful Patreons who deal with my silliness. Thank you my tier 1s. Pony Entertainment, Macario, Lord High, Jason, Hyperlink, Chase the Master, Balance Kindness, Last Nebula, Night and Game, Sword Brother, and Mordred, Dreamless Portal. My tier 2s, Captain Blue Shadow, Chaotic Mist, The Animated Ghost, DJ Max 2000, Elemental Wolf, H1 Wolf, King Potato 20, Mr. Crazy Deacon, Solar Comet, 200 Hot Trooper, Volcoid, G-Man 121 Garza, Mackenzie, McColes, Nocturne, Papa Leonard, Redeemer of Dark Souls, Eclipse, Sword Brother, and Mordred, Artie Bryant, Riani, Dragonwolf, Steel Spark, Saint, Gonk, and Styx. A big thank you to my previous Titan tiers, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and User 1842. A big thank you to my current ones, Abyss Eclipse and Silent Titan. I appreciate your guys' support so freaking much, and it means a ton to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.